In a distant region of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of ordinary civilizations, there existed a massive interspecies medical station where the most advanced doctors from hundreds of alien worlds worked together, sharing knowledge, studying life, and pushing the limits of science. And among all known species recorded in their vast databases, humans were considered insignificant, fragile creatures with weak bodies and limited lifespans, beings who relied more on emotion than logic, a species that barely survived on its own planet, let alone in the harsh conditions of space. This belief was so deeply accepted that no one ever questioned it, until one unexpected day when everything changed. It started with an emergency alert echoing through the station. A transport ship had arrived carrying a critically injured human. The condition report was alarming: severe internal trauma, multiple organ failure, internal bleeding at catastrophic levels, neurological instability, and near total systemic collapse. According to every known medical standard across the galaxy, survival in such a state was impossible. Yet the patient was still alive, barely but alive, and that alone was enough to confuse the entire medical team. As they rushed the human into the advanced treatment chamber, their instruments began scanning his body in real time, displaying detailed holographic images of his internal condition. The sight was disturbing even for experienced doctors. Organs were damaged beyond repair, bones fractured, blood loss extreme, and yet, against all logic, his heart continued to beat, slow but steady, refusing to stop. The lead doctor, an ancient being known for his knowledge of over 300 species, stared at the data in disbelief, quietly stating that no organism should be able to sustain life under these conditions. Another doctor suggested immediate termination protocols, believing further effort would be a waste of resources. But something about the readings made them hesitate. Something didn't feel right, so they decided to observe for a few more moments before making any final decision. And those moments would soon turn into the most shocking discovery in galactic medical history. As time passed, subtle changes began to appear in the human's body. Changes so small at first that they were almost ignored. The bleeding started to slow down without any external intervention. Damaged tissues began showing signs of repair. Cellular activity increased in areas that were previously considered dead. One of the doctors leaned closer to the display, adjusting the scan resolution, and what he saw made him step back in fear. The human cells were regenerating, not just repairing damage, but actively rebuilding themselves at an accelerated rate, adapting to the trauma, reinforcing weakened structures. It was as if the body had activated a hidden survival mechanism far beyond anything the galaxy had ever documented. Panic began to spread. Among the doctors, whispers filled the room as they tried to understand what they were witnessing. Some believed it to be a rare mutation. Others feared it could be a dangerous biological anomaly. But the truth was far more unsettling. This was not an exception. This was normal for humans. The lead doctor accessed the galactic database, searching for any record of similar behavior, but the information on humans was limited and outdated, describing them as physically inferior and medically unremarkable. Clearly, that assessment had been terribly wrong. As the hours passed, the human's condition continued to improve. Broken bones began to fuse back together. Internal bleeding completely stopped. Damaged organs slowly regained functionality. And what was most terrifying was the speed at which all of this was happening. It defied every scientific principle known to the alien civilizations. One of the younger doctors, unable to contain his fear, asked if this meant humans were some kind of hidden superspecies, something far more advanced than they appeared. But the lead doctor remained silent, his eyes fixed on the data as he tried to process the implications. Because if this level of recovery was natural, then humans were not weak at all. They were incredibly resilient, dangerously adaptive, a species that evolved through hardship and survived conditions that would wipe out entire civilizations. Suddenly, an alert sounded from the monitoring system. The human's vital signs were stabilizing rapidly, heart rate returning to normal, brain activity increasing, respiratory system recovering, and before anyone could react, the human's eyes slowly opened. His gaze moving across the room as if trying to understand where he was. The doctors froze, none of them prepared for what came next. The human took a deep breath, then another, and with visible effort, he pushed himself up from the medical bed, ignoring the fact that his body had been moments away from death. One of the doctors instinctively stepped back, another dropped the scanning device from his hand, the sound echoing in the silent room. The human looked at them, confused but calm, and in a weak but steady voice, he spoke, asking a simple question: "Where am I?" That moment changed everything, because it proved beyond doubt that humans could recover from injuries that were considered absolutely fatal, not through advanced technology, not through external assistance, but through their own biological capability. After stabilizing the situation, the doctors began a deeper analysis, studying every detail of the human physiology, and what they discovered sent shockwaves through the entire station. Human bodies were not designed for perfection, they were designed for survival. Their systems were inefficient compared to other species, but incredibly flexible, capable of adapting to damage, stress, and extreme conditions. Their immune response was aggressive, their cellular repair mechanisms highly active, and their tolerance for pain far beyond what most species could endure. In simple terms, humans were not built to avoid injury, they were built to survive it. As this realization spread, the galactic database was immediately updated, reclassifying humans from a low-threat species to a high-risk adaptive organism, and warnings were issued across multiple systems, advising caution when interacting with humans, not because they were hostile, but because they were unpredictable, a species that could endure suffering, recover from destruction, and come back stronger, a species that could not be easily eliminated. And as news of the incident spread from one civilization to another, fear began to replace ignorance, because if a single human could survive such extreme damage, then the potential of their entire species was beyond imagination. And somewhere in the vast silence of space, a new understanding began to take shape. Humans were not the weakest species in the galaxy, they were something far more dangerous, something that even the most advanced civilizations had failed to recognize, a species whose greatest strength was not power or intelligence, but the simple, terrifying ability to survive, adapt, and continue, no matter the odds. And from that day forward, one rule was quietly added to the protocols of every major civilization: never underestimate a human, because what appears fragile on the outside may hide a force of nature that refuses to break, refuses to die, and refuses to be forgotten.